Greetings, friends. I was in the middle of writing this week's article when I learned that the U.S. election has apparently been decided. I would like to comment on what I believe is the significance of this event. I understand that the validity of the results is under challenge, but those challenges would not nullify what I'm about to say. The end of this week's parsha describes how Avraham Avinu remarries at the end of his life and becomes the father of additional children. He gives these children, quote, gifts, and then sends them, quote, away from Yitzchak, his son, Kedma, El Eretz Kedem, eastward to the land of the east. What does it mean, eastward to the land of the east? And why does Avraham Avinu want to separate these children from Yitzchak? Rav Chaim Yisrael Belsky Zatzal discusses this passage. Chazal tell us that there is one place in the world outside Eretz Yisrael where Avodah Zarah, which is idol worship, was exceedingly strong. That is somewhere in the Far East. Harav Yitzchak Hutner Zatzal used to explain, this is continuing the quote from Rabbi Belsky, that the reason we see so much Avodah Zarah emanating from the Far East is to be found in the words of the pasuk, which I just quoted above, regarding the sons of Avraham Avinu who were sent to the east. Rashi, continues Rabbi Belsky, writes that the gifts which Avraham Avinu gave to the children of his concubines were the shame, tuma, names of impurity. In other words, Avraham gave them the pseudo-spiritual practices rooted in Sitra Achra, which means the dimension of impurity, the evil inclination. This storehouse of impure wisdom was sent to the Far East, as suggested by the repetition of the words Kedma, Kedem. Apparently, says Rebelsky, Avraham tried to get rid of this impurity by sending it far out, but he was not completely successful. What is the dimension of impurity to which Rabbi Belsky refers? I'm not going to attempt to define impurity, tuma, because the answer is so deep. But we know that impurity was introduced into mankind when Adam and Chava introduced death into the world at the moment that they ate the fruit that was forbidden to them in the Garden of Eden. At that moment, death entered the world. Along with death came every form of suffering. Contact with the dead is the primary source of impurity. The forces of impurity that were unleashed 5,781 years ago in Gan Eden and the Garden of Eden have been in ascendancy from that moment onward. As we learned from Rabbi Belsky, the seat of impurity is in the Far East. From the first day of the secular year 2020, this year, the plague of corona emanating from the Far East has spread across the world. It is more than a physical plague. It is also a spiritual plague, which has terrible, destructive potential, God forbid. I do not think it is an accident that the Petira, the death of Hagaon Harav David Feinstein Zatzal, occurred shortly before election results were announced in the United States. So many of our Gedolim, our leading rabbis, have left us in recent decades, that we have little protection against the onslaught of this tumah, this impurity. Am Yisrael, the children of Israel, who have brought Torah into the world, are the only shield standing in the way of the domination of Tumah over the entire world. The Beis Hamikdash, the holy temple, for which we are so desperately waiting, was the antidote to Tumah. As the prophet says, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, u'devar Hashem Yerushalayim. From Zion the Torah will come forth, and the word of Hashem from Yerushalayim. We have no temple today, and Tumah is strengthening itself. Those who are rooted in impurity have lost their sense of embarrassment, and now the tsunami of impurity is threatening to engulf the entire world. In my book, Hold On, Surviving the Days Before Mashiach, I speak about certain practices reflecting moral deterioration, which our rabbis tell us caused the great flood to engulf the earth. Those practices are once again becoming prevalent throughout the world. I, for one, do not believe that Hashem will allow these impure practices, which caused the destruction of the world 4,125 years ago, to continue. As we saw last week, in the case of Sodom, there is a limit to the extent to which Hashem will tolerate evil. Hashem revealed to Avram Avinu in the Bris Bein Habasarim, which we read about a few weeks ago, that his children would inherit the Holy Land only when the iniquity of the Amorite shall be full. Rashi comments that Hashem does not exact punishment from a nation until its measure of sin is full. My friends, it appears that the measure of sin in the world is nearly full. Those who deny the existence of the master of the universe are in ascendance. At some point, Hashem will act, and we must be prepared. As King David says in Psalm 92, quote, when the wicked bloom like grass, and all the doers of iniquity blossom, it is to destroy them until eternity. Right now, it is our job to hold on to Hashem and his Torah with all our strength. Let us hope the day will come soon when, and this is a quote from the prayer Aleinu, which we say 3 times every day, idolatry will be removed from the earth and false gods will be cut off, to perfect the universe through the Almighty's sovereignty. On that day, Hashem will be one, and his name will be one. Good Shabbos.